Okay, hey, how cool is that? It looks like we are live and in color. So I don't know if anyone is already there. If you are already on the screen and you can watch it, please let me know that it works. Is anyone out there? Say something in the chat, please. I hope I've... fine. Emily, thank you very much. That's great. Brilliant to know. All working good. So basically, as usual, we know that the technology works. I had a little bit of a problem. Almost 500,000 years without toilet paper, so who needs toilet paper? So obviously I need to wait a little bit longer and wait for people to come in. But maybe actually this is the future of teaching. What do you guys think about it? Would this be a replacement for lectures, a temporary replacement, or what do you think? Would you like a lot of in-class, face-to-face, or more of the just online, or a mixture? What's your view? Okay, yeah, I see that, Emily, yeah. It can be very valuable. And in a way, for me, it's sort of, I like the interaction with students who are actually sort of alive, if you like. So I can see your point. Bob, it's interesting, but you're chatting at the moment. No, yeah, okay, yeah, I can see it. I mean, I'd rather speak to somebody in person, see their face, see their reactions, than just read some messages on the screen. So I get it. Yeah, yeah, and I understand. Yeah. But then I just had a thought, actually. If we had these sort of online things, maybe, perhaps, at the moment, I'm in my office at the university, but if we do more from home office, then, you know, perhaps I can do a little bit more of a personal touch. I mean, usually when I'm in my office, the dogs come in and want to play with me. So I think that would be quite fun to have that on screen. What do you think? Is that too personal, or would it be good fun next time? Have a dog or a cat? Yep, dogs are always appreciated. Yep. Although we had a discussion whether we should do more Skype interviews, the college masters, and I have to say I really don't like the Skype stuff. Maybe Zoom. Have you heard about Zoom as a sort of a conferencing tool? Uh-huh. Yeah, dogs are a bit attraction. I know. I know. People love dogs. Yeah, maybe we can think of a little bit of a Zoom conference if I get the software to run all right. Would be quite interesting. Just a quick question: how is the sound quality? Can you probably properly hear me? Is it distorted or too loud, too quiet? Thank you. And no problems with buffering. Lovely, thank you. No problems with buffering? No buffering. Hey, cool. I mean, obviously that means it's not like Kent Player. I heard that Kent Player sometimes has a little bit of a problem. I think we are just simply trying to make the most and the best out of this situation with the virus. Mind you, I heard recently that they identified who is behind this virus. And I think this for all the conspiracy people, this is great stuff. Who do you think, if this virus has been generated, who do you think is behind the virus? Who has done it? Because I have some thoughts on that. By the Freemasons. Oh, that's interesting. US government, 100%. What's my theory? Well, I think there are two potential culprits. One is Netflix, because people who are staying at home are bored out of their mind, and they subscribe to basically anything, don't they? So Netflix. And the other one is Andrex, the producer of toilet paper. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. Well, I'm not getting into politics, but I just see on the clock here, it's 5 past the hours. So this means, do you know what this means? It means a most wonderful good morning, ladies and jelly beans. Let's make a start with the TCA cycle. Fantastic. So keep the comments going. I'll try to keep that as interactive as possible and hopefully as much fun as possible. And the sort of the catchphrase for today is, I'm going to shock you now. I'm going to talk about the opposite of social distancing today, because the important thing today is, can I kiss Sexy Susie's friend more often, please? Doesn't make sense to you, right? But this is the mnemonic for what we are going to do today. So, in previous lectures, this took a turn for the strange. Yes, absolutely. I'm delighted to hear that. So, in the previous lectures, we discussed how cells, how metabolism actually uses glucose, uses energy to keep us going. So, we said before I forget it, please don't forget to do your quizzes. The deadline is, I think, this Sunday at 5 p.m. So please get these in. I can't extend the deadline for this BI 301 for all the quizzes altogether. If you've got problems, let me know and I'll try to sort you out. So back to biochemistry. So we said our energy consumption is, we have about 5 to 6 seconds of energy in the form of ATP. And if we need more energy, obviously, then we need to get into our glycogen stores. And I told you the liver is the main storage organ for glycogen. And but the skeletal muscles on a weight basis have actually more glycogen in it. So liver has about 100 grams of glycogen, muscles have about 400 grams. And this glycogen store actually will last us for about 24 hours. So we have seen how we can convert glycogen to glucose. And the glucose we have seen in the glycolysis, how this is converted into basically 2 molecules of pyruvate, 2 molecules of ATP, and 2 molecules of NADH. And that is what glucose actually can deliver. So, of course, it's not a terribly efficient way of dealing with that, because it only gives us 2 molecules of ATP. And that's not a lot if we think about the glucose. So we probably need to do something a little bit more efficient with the glucose, or generate more ATP from our very precious glucose. We also know that some organs, for example the brain and red blood cells, are absolutely reliant on glucose. At least red blood cells, they don't have any other form of getting their energy. They need glucose. Glucose is absolutely essential for the blood cells. And if there's no glucose, red blood cells won't work. Brain also has some issues if there's not enough glucose. So if our glucose levels in the blood are low, we trigger the liver to initiate the release of liver glycogen and supply glucose in the bloodstream. And if that then runs out, the liver has the opportunity to basically reverse this reaction from pyruvate and produce glucose, which it then can feed into the bloodstream to feed the erythrocytes and the brain cells, but the reversal requires energy. So in a way it cannot maintain it. But it's important to feed these organs with glucose because they can't use anything else. But as I said, it's not terribly efficient. So we need to come up with an idea how we can make this process more efficient. And what we can do is we can transport the pyruvate molecule. We can transport that into mitochondria. So mitochondria. And this is in mitochondria, this is where everything takes place. In the mitochondrial matrix, this is where all reactions take place. And what we can do in the mitochondria with the pyruvate, let me just quickly draw the structure for pyruvate. We can convert that with the help of a co-substrate, I would like to call it here. This co-substrate is a high energy substrate, and it helps us to conserve the energy of what is in this pyruvate molecule. This co-substrate is coenzyme A, and I've written it here so that you see the really important thing here. We've got a sulfur molecule or sulfur atom sitting here, and that can form a sulfur what is called a thioester, with what I'm going to show you. And what happens in the mitochondria with this pyruvate is we can remove this COO minus. So we remove carbon dioxide, and we can also oxidize this molecule, and we get another molecule of NADH. And what we end up with is one molecule of, and I write it like that, H3COS-CoA. And sometimes you see it as a sort of a weird wavy bond. This just simply indicates that this is a very, very high energy bond. And this substance here, which is called acetyl-CoA, this is one of the key points of metabolism. This is absolutely essential and crucial, and this molecule is really the key point. Strictly speaking, acetyl-CoA has yet nothing to do with the next following steps with the TCA cycle. It is sort of the prelude, the preface to the TCA cycle, but strictly speaking, it is not a compound or an intermediate of the acetyl of the TCA cycle that produces lots of energy. This reaction is catalyzed by one of the most amazing complexes that we have. It is called the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. which is massive, a really, really massive complex of several enzymes together. I'm not going into detail how and what the different components are, but this is a massive, massive complex. It's larger than the ribosome. And basically, all it does, it removes the carbon dioxide from pyruvate, and it reduces it, and it produces acetyl-CoA. So if you want to know more about this complex, have a look at your textbooks at Leininger or Stryer or something like that. And this acetyl-CoA, as I said, this is the starting point for what I consider total magic. What we can do now is we can feed this acetyl-CoA, and we are already in the right environment. We are in the mitochondrial matrix where the TCA cycle actually happens. And we can try to use this acetyl-CoA in order to get more energy, more ATP. And this acetyl-CoA contains a lot of energy still, which we can harness to produce ATP. So how does it actually work? Well, in the first step, let's have a look at this acetyl-CoA, because that's really a great molecule, and we can learn quite a little bit from that. Let me write it like that, S-CoA, and let me write this as something like that. What we can see when we look at this molecule is that there are different, we can sort of attribute different charges, excuse me, different areas of this molecule. So, excuse me, at least I'm not contagious as far as I know. This oxygen here pulls electrons in this direction. And the thioester also pulls electrons in this direction. So this carbon here is partially positive. And I write this as a small sort of delta positive, but it's not really positive. No, it's not persistent, don't worry. And I don't have corona, I only do Budweiser. So, back to that. This carbon is slightly positive. Now, of course, it wants to stabilize itself, so it pulls electrons. Again, electrons are pulled in this direction. And this poor carbon here now says, hey, hang on, what am I supposed to do? Everybody's pulling at me. I can't do anything. So what this carbon actually can do is it can sort of try and get an electron pair from one of the protons. So what it could, if we look at it like that, what it could look like is that we get something like, almost like that, which would give us a negative charge on this carbon here. So these bonds here with the hydrogens are actually sort of negative. We can produce almost a carb anion. An anion is negatively charged. So we know that this part of the molecule is slightly negative charged, whereas this carbon here is potentially slightly positive charged. So what can we do with it? Well, we can attach our acetyl-CoA to a carrier molecule, and we have encountered this carrier molecule already. So the carrier molecule of this would be this molecule. So let's see if you can identify this molecule. What is this molecule? You have encountered it. We have discussed this molecule in one of the previous lectures. What is it? Oliver says oxalacetate. Is he right? Yes, you're absolutely right. Well done. It is oxalacetate. Just a little trick. This one here, this bit here, is like acetate, CH something, COO minus, that's acetate part. And this part here, this comes from the smallest dicarbonic acid from COO minus, which is oxalic acid. So therefore we have oxalacetate. And what we can do now is we can attach our acetyl-CoA, so CH3COS-CoA. Let me just quickly check something. Yeah, I've done that right. We can attach it. And the way we attach it is we have another positive molecule or part here in this carbonyl group. Carbonyl groups are usually positively, have a small positive region here. And we said we've got a negative bit here, so we can attach that. We kick off the S-CoA, and what we get, and I need to, I had to practice this quite a lot. What we get is a molecule which is, I absolutely love it because it's so beautifully symmetrical. So what we have is a 4-carbon molecule with the oxalacetate and a 2-carbon molecule with the acetyl-CoA. And it gives us a 6-carbon molecule, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with an OH group and 3 carboxyl groups, 3 acid groups. And this molecule is citric acid, which gives this cycle its name. It's the citric acid cycle, or tricarboxyl acid, TCA cycle, or it's also called, the whole cycle is called the Krebs cycle. And these because Hans Krebs was the guy who discovered this thing. So this is our citric acid, and that is the first letter of can I kiss and so on and so forth. So that's citric acid. And the enzyme that catalyzes that is called citrate synthase, usually abbreviated CS. I tell you what, I'm not going into the enzymes because you can look them up in Leninger or any other biochemistry textbooks. What we now do is we just simply shift our carbonyl group, our OH group, we shift that down here in another reaction, and we get this molecule CH2 COO minus, we get CH, COO minus, and we get COH. We have an H here and COO minus, and this is called isocitrate. Similar to citric acid, just we moved the hydroxy group. And what we can do now is we can, and this isocitrate is slightly less stable. And what we can do is we can remove an NADH of that. So we oxidize this molecule, and at the same time we also remove carbon dioxide from it. So where do we take basically the electrons? The electrons are taken from here. And where do we take the carbon dioxide? We take the carbon dioxide from here. So what we get with this is now a molecule that looks like CH2COO minus, CH2, CO and COO minus. And this guy is called alpha ketoglutarate. Alpha ketoglutarate. So we have citrate or citric acid, can I kiss. So ketoglutarate, and we've got one molecule of NADH. In the next step, what we can do is we oxidize and we remove carbon dioxide and produce an NADH. And we see that this is a really common theme. We can remove carbon dioxide and at the same time we get an NADH. So let me highlight that. So carbon dioxide, NADH, carbon dioxide, NADH. Up here in the pyruvate, carbon dioxide, NADH. What we get now is a different molecule. We conserve some energy. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons. If we remove a carbon dioxide, we get the following molecule. We get CH2CO minus. So that's the top bit. We have CH2. And this time what the group that we removed, that is our carbon dioxide that we remove. So we have COS-CoA. And we conserve the energy by adding HS-CoA. So whenever we want to conserve energy, we use this cofactor here or co-substrate, and we store this energy. So this molecule is called succinyl-CoA. Again, a fairly important compound in metabolism because there are quite a number of reactions that rely on this as a substrate. Now we have energy stored in here, and whenever we have this kind of energy, it would make sense to use it, doesn't it? So what is our main energy currency in the cell? What is energy currency in the cell? What is sort of the petrodollar of the cell? Which compound? Over to you guys. ATP, ATP. Lovely. Yep, we have ATP. And now here comes a shock for you. Are you ready for this shock? No. Right. We convert this molecule. We just simply hydrolyze this thioester bond, this high energy bond. And you can see what we get. We get CH, COO minus, CH2, COO minus. This molecule is succinate. And we transfer the energy of this thioester bond onto, wait for it, GDP and produce GTP. Shocking, isn't it? It's not ATP. It's GTP that we produce. Well, I think in some plants you actually use ATP or generate ATP. This again would be called substrate-level phosphorylation. Abbreviated like that. And we had this substrate-level phosphorylation when we looked at the glycolysis. Remember? Go back to glycolysis, have a check, because this production of ATP is not reliant on the oxidative phosphorylation. Katie asks, is that the same as ATP, but with guanine? And you are absolutely spot on. And your teacher actually is also spot on. Yep, the guanine doesn't feel left out. Now, the great thing is, what we can do is we can actually very easily convert GTP and ATP into each other. So the reaction basically is, if you've got GTP plus ADP, and that's really a totally reversible reaction, you can do ATP plus GDP. So this reaction is very easily converted by an enzyme, a ubiquitous enzyme, which is called nucleotide diphosphate kinase, or lovingly known as NUDIKI. NUDIKIs can convert ADP and anything TP into ATP and DP, if you like. So it's not really that horrible that we get GTP, because we can immediately convert GTP into our unique currency. So Good stuff. We are soon done. So we have succinate. And succinate actually, again, I love that. I love succinate because it is a really nice symmetrical molecule. So we have the acid function, CH2, CH2, and COO minus. Beautifully symmetrical. In the next step, what we do is we remove 2 hydrogens from it, and we get, I hope I can draw this properly. So it would be COO minus, COO minus, H. So we have this molecule. And this molecule is actually called fumarate. Why don't we get the alternative? So the alternative would be like this. Obviously that's a different molecule. Why don't we get this molecule? When we use succinate and the enzyme succinate dehydrogenase, why do we only get 100% fumarate? What do you think? What is the reason for that? Over to you. Yeah, steric hindrance. The charges repel if they are close. Yes, great stuff, great stuff. Yep. Yep. You're absolutely right, guys. You're absolutely right. You get it. The main thing really is that we get 100% of fumarate is just simply because the enzyme succinate dehydrogenase is an enzyme that is stereospecific. And on a molecular level, and Bob puts it to the point, the shape of the active site on the enzyme. Absolutely right. This is exactly the shape of the active site dictates how the reaction proceeds. And that gives an enzyme the really stereospecific, stereoselective edge. So that 100% of this, only of one molecule is produced. So that's a really lovely example how enzymes have this incredible ability to choose one of the products over the other. And of course, since we remove 2 hydrogens, we can transfer these onto another compound. Now we have seen before that when we have hydrogens, we usually use NADH as an hydrogen transporter. In this case, these hydrogens are not that rich in energy, and therefore they can't really reduce this NADH, but they can reduce flavin adenine dinucleotide, so we can produce FADH. And I just want to highlight this as well. Because FADH then can also be fueled into the oxidative phosphorylation, but it does not give us as much ATP as NADH would give. So FADH would give about 1.5 mole of ATP, whereas NADH, this gives roughly 2.5 mole ATP. And the reason why we can't use NAD or why we don't produce NADH is just simply because these hydrogen atoms don't have enough energy. Okay, so now we have this lovely fumarate molecule. And what we can do is, if we just simply add water to that, to fumarate, we get another molecule that is stereospecific. And again, I need to be very careful with how I draw this guy. So we have COO minus, and I've got a little piece of paper here. So we add water to that. So that's at the back. I think you are all familiar with the way I draw this. This means, this bit here means it's pointing towards us. This dotted line means it is pointing away from us. And we get a molecule like this. So what you see is we just simply added, let me use a different color, we just simply added a water molecule to that. This is done by the enzyme fumarase. And we get a molecule that usually people just simply write as COCHOH, CH2COO minus, but it is a stereospecific molecule because we have 3 different residues here, so it can exist as S and L molecules. Here, this molecule is called malate. Anyone know where this name could come from? Malate? Any ideas? No? Latin for apple. It's Latin, absolutely, yes. I'm pleased to hear that people have done some Latin. It is absolutely right. It comes from the Latin word for apple, malus, as Eleanor says, which means, yeah, apple. So this is a very typical compound, not just in apples or in fruit. It's basically in everybody's cell, if you like. So we are so close to it now. We are so close to finish the TCA cycle. Because what we can do now is, with the enzyme malate dehydrogenase, we can remove again NADH from it. Let's highlight this guy. Well, yes, I had planned to do another lecture on ketoneogenesis on it to answer Oliver's question. How do people feel about it? Before I carry on. Are you happy with that? So we carry on. We are going to have a coffee break though. Yeah, of course. I just want to quickly finish this. It should be another 5 minutes. Okay? Good. So we remove 2 hydrogens from that. And the hydrogens are pretty obvious that we are going to remove. It's the 2 hydrogens in here. And we get NADH. So we get COO minus, CO, CH2, COO minus. Now let's see if you actually identify this molecule. Back to you. What molecule is that? Guys, I'm so proud of you. Seriously. You are absolutely right. We got oxaloacetate back. Oxaloacetate. We got this oxaloacetate back from this whole procedure. And if you go back, this was our starting point here. This is our sort of the carrier for the whole process. And if you like, sort of really schematic, we have oxaloacetate. We fuel in our acetyl-CoA. We have several reactions, and we return to oxaloacetate. So we lose on the way 2 CO2s. Actually, when you look at experiments where you, for example, radiolabel your acetyl-CoA, you find that these carbon dioxide, the 2 carbon dioxides, when you put that only radiolabeled acetyl-CoA into the cycle, you find that these 2 carbon dioxide do not carry actually the radioactivity. The radioactivity, the label would still be in the oxaloacetate. So in a way, these carbon dioxides do not come directly from the acetyl-CoA. They come from the oxaloacetate, but we regenerate it. So next time you put in an acetyl-CoA without the labels, what you find is then that your carbon dioxides actually contain the labels. So these carbon dioxides are not directly, immediately produced from the acetyl-CoA. They are produced, or they come from the oxaloacetate. But in the grand scheme, it doesn't really matter where they come from, because what it does is we totally destroy our acetyl that we have here and convert that into carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide, if you like, that's the lowest form of carbon, the lowest energy form of carbon on Earth, because you can't oxidize this any further. So what have we got? When we look at it, we start with our acetyl-CoA. We convert that into CO2, not CO3. Under atmospheric conditions, carbon dioxide is the lowest form. CO3, well, you would have that as an acid. Yes and no. Yes and no. If you insist, Leo, but of course, CO3 would have a negative charge attached to it. So if we use our acetyl-CoA, we convert that into 2 carbon dioxides. That's what we have here. Let's see how many NADH we have. So we have 1 here. We have 1 here. And we have 1 here. So we have 3 NADH. We have 1 FADH. And we have 1 molecule of GTP, well, which is more or less the same as ATP. So that is what we get from our acetyl-CoA. If we have pyruvate and do this reaction, then here we produce another carbon dioxide, and we also produce 1 NADH. Which makes sense because pyruvate is 3 carbons. So we have 1 then here and the 2 carbons from the acetyl-CoA. So we've got everything looks all right. We haven't lost a carbon. And if we think about glycolysis, so we start with glucose. We get 2 molecules of pyruvate. So here then we would get, for each pyruvate, we get, let me just check this. We get 2 ATP plus 2 NADH. And of course that is for 1 pyruvate, but glucose gives us the whole thing twice. Oh my God, are you all right, Cyan? Or did you just fall onto your keyboard? That doesn't look good. Anyway, so if we do the total sum of what we get is we have glucose is converted into 6 carbon dioxide plus where is it? 6 carbon dioxide. We have 2 ATPs. Actually, it's 4 ATPs because we do the pyruvate twice, so we need to do that twice. Let's do it. Let's do it from here. So we run this cycle 3 times. We have got 6 carbon dioxide. We've got 4 ATPs. We got 10 NADH. We get 2 FADH. And we get 2 GTP. So let's see how much ATP we can get. We don't need to worry about the carbon dioxide. That's the end product. So that's not a problem. We have 4 ATP. Each one of these guys gives us 2.5 ATP. So we have 25 ATP from the NADH. Each one of this gives us 1.5 ATP, so we've got 3 ATP. And we've got 2 GTP, which is the same as 2 ATP. That's this one here. So let's do a big sum. We have 4 plus 25 is 29, plus 3 is 32, so we get 34 molecules of ATP from 1 molecule of glucose. Now compare that with what we get if we just do glycolysis. If we just did glycolysis, we go from glucose to pyruvate, we only get 2 ATP and 2 NADH. And if we say 2 NADH, that gives us 2.5. We get this twice. So we have 2.5, that's 5, 7. That would be 7 ATP. The equivalent of 7 ATP, because we run it twice, glycolysis gives us only 14 ATP, if you like. But with the TCA cycle and oxidative phosphorylation, we get 34 ATP, which is big, which is massive in terms of energy production. So, can I kiss? Sexy Susie's friend more often? This basically tells you the different compounds. Here we've got citrate, isocitrate, ketoglutarate, succinyl-CoA, succinate, fumarate, malate, oxaloacetate. Of course, I do not propose in any way that you think about kissing somebody at the moment, whether it is Sexy Susie's friend or somebody else, because we are unfortunately have social distancing. So bear that in mind and stay safe. I also suggest we have a 5-minute coffee break or whatever, and then we carry on with ketogenesis and what we can do if we are running out of glucose, of acetyl-CoA. Oh, a good question, Maisie. Is it FADH or FADH2? You find different textbooks. I think you are probably right. I should say it is FADH2. Because people write it sometimes in different forms. Really, realistically, instead of NADH2, one would write NADH H+. So whenever I write FADH or NADH, I actually mean these compounds, but thank you for pointing out. It means the reduced forms. That make sense? I'll see you back in 5, unless you have any pressing questions. Okay, see you later in 5. No, it's exactly the same. Alpha ketoglutarate, that is alpha ketoglutarate, but then you can't do the "Can I kiss Sexy Susie's friend?" Because then what do you do instead of the kiss with an A? Actually, somebody told me that there are some very rude mnemonics for the citric acid cycle, but they would not disclose what these mnemonics are. So, and I'm not supposed to tell you anything anyway. But actually, it's quite a good trick to use mnemonics to learn things. But as you rightly say, yeah, I should have written alpha ketoglutarate. You're absolutely right. Oh, and I got a phone call, which I'm not going to take. That's the joy of working in an office. Ooh, are there any tried and tested ways? Richard asks. That's a very good question, actually. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, if you're if you are chemically minded, then all the reactions are sort of, in a way, logical. If you start from oxaloacetate, you add the acetyl-CoA, you get the symmetric molecule of citric acid, tricarbonic acid. You shift the OH group, remove the hydrogens and one of the middle carbon, carboxylic acid. To answer your question, Richard, I'm sure there are ways you can do that, but okay, let me put it this way. In the exam, whatever form it will be, God knows what form it is, as far as I know, but I'm not allowed to say that at the moment because it's not official, it's going to be a sort of online exams. So I can't really see how people do multiple choice quizzes with that, because you guys are not sick. Hey, come on. If you've been given an exam, a problem-solving question or multiple choice, how soon will these answers be on the group chat? So we really need to think about different ways of assessing whether you have achieved the learning outcomes. Anyway, will I actually ask any questions about structures in an exam? Probably not, because it's memorizing. I mean, if you ask me in about 3 weeks' time the different compounds of the TCA cycle, I probably would have to say, oh, I have to look it up again. Will I do that with you? Not sure that I really see any point in you guys memorizing these things. Maybe some enzyme names, but not sure. Honestly, not sure. I don't think it will get any more difficult than quiz 6 from the online quizzes in BI 301. And actually, I would suggest maybe you want to have a good look at these quizzes, at this particular quiz, because, well, if we still do multiple choice, I think the questions are really, really good. So you might find them again in the exam. But I didn't say that. Right, how are people doing with coffee, with a wee break, with a fag, things like that? 1 more minute? Tea is still brewing. Get the tea bag out. Or do you prefer loose leaf? Yeah. I mean, There's no problem in the world that cannot be solved with hot chocolate. I fully agree. And if you want to really push out the boat, my favorite is either hot chocolate with eggnog and some whipped cream on top, or you can also have hot chocolate with rum in it. Oh, I tell you what, this is decadence. This is luxury. Some interesting suggestions. Right, okay, before you get carried away, let's think a little bit about what happens if we are actually running out of if we are running out of glucose. We are actually screwed, aren't we? I need to get you back from the oat milk. Forget the oat milk. How do you actually milk oat? Anyway, if we run out of sugar, then we have a problem. Because our red blood cells are totally reliant on glucose. And that is where the liver comes in. The liver can actually produce, through the process of gluconeogenesis, our glucose, but it comes at an expense. So for energy production, if we run out of glucose, we need to explore a different source. And that's absolutely vital. And actually, if you think about it, we have a lot of high energy fuels stored in our bodies. This is in the form of fatty acids. So fatty acids and triglycerides. You have done that in BI 300. We have glycerol, and I just simply draw it like that. These are the fatty acids. And this is actually an incredible store of potential high energy compounds. What we can do is we can cleave these fatty acid esters. We get the individual fatty acids. And in a process that is called beta oxidation in mitochondria, we can break fatty acids down. My colleague Dave Beal will tell you about beta oxidation next week. And we can break down these fatty acids into acetyl-CoA. And that could deliver potentially a lot of energy, as we just seen. We just can fuel that into the TCA cycle. And that's absolutely brilliant. However, there's a slight problem. And this problem lies in the nature of the fatty acid. So let's draw it like that, COO minus. I would like you to quickly think about what is a big fatty acid and how easy can it be transported in the blood? Is it easy to transport? Yes or yes? In the blood. What do you think? A large fatty acid. Ryan says yes, it's easy. Eleanor says no. Oh. Richard, no. Okay. Ben says it's hydrophobic, so it's not very easy to transport. It only has this tiny little hydrophilic bit. And in a way, yes, it can get deposited, but usually fatty acids never occur in the bloodstream per se. They are usually sort of engulfed in other vesicles, in the very low and high density lipoid vesicles. And again, my colleague will tell you about this next week in the lecture. But the problem is that A, we cannot easily transport fatty acids. That's one problem. The other problem, fatty acids, and let's see if my drawing skills how good my drawing skills are actually. Oh dear. Okay, that is supposed to be the brain. Yeah, I think that probably is a good reflection of how my brain looks at the moment. Fatty acids just simply cannot penetrate the blood-brain barrier. They cannot get through. And this barrier is actually really important. It prevents us from all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff getting into the brain and basically messing the brain up and damaging the neurons in it. So that's why we have this very strict blood-brain barrier. It's basically the borders are closed and the fatty acids cannot get through. So we have potentially a lot of high energy compounds sitting there in the body. And it turns out that, for example, the reserves, the energy reserves that is stored in the fatty acids in the adipose tissue for a normal weight person will last for about 3 months. If you think about it, a normal person could survive for 3 months without eating anything. So if somebody says to me, who had just a big breakfast this morning, and earlier than in the afternoon or later in the afternoon, they say, I'm starving to death. No, you're not. Let's talk about it in 2.5 months' time. Then you're starving to death, because then you've exhausted all your fatty acid stores in the adipose tissue. but you can easily survive for, let's say, 2.5 months without intake of any food. But how does that work? Because, I mean, the brain needs food, doesn't it? And we cannot feed the brain with fatty acids because they don't transport well and they can't go through the blood-brain barrier. So we need a transport form that we can use to send it to the brain. Erythrocytes cannot deal with fatty acids simply because the erythrocytes, the red blood cells, do not have any mitochondria, and the beta oxidation of the fatty acids only happens in mitochondria. So red blood cells, they are really the poor relations. They just get, they can only eat glucose. Brain can adapt, but we need to get the right food transported to the brain cells. So, what can we do? In the liver, and this is a process that only happens in the liver, only the liver has these enzymes. What we can do is we take acetyl-CoA. And we have lots of acetyl-CoA in the liver because we are running the, we can run the TCA cycle. Plus, actually, we take another molecule of acetyl-CoA. And we combine them. What we do is we just simply cut it here. And we get this molecule. Let's see, how can I draw that? CH3CO, CH2CO, S-CoA. So basically, this attacks here. And it makes sense because we said this is partially positive, this here is partially negative. So, and I symbolize that it's partial by just simply adding these deltas, which indicates it's a little bit. Okay, so that's this molecule. This molecule is actually called acetyl acetyl-CoA. So acetyl-CoA. When does this happen? It happens when we have a lot of the acetyl-CoA present, because then we combine these two, and actually this, if you think about it, this would be a second order reaction where we have the same compound. We did that in the Bi308 molecules. Also, let's not forget, the liver is a very special organ because the liver can do gluconeogenesis. And if you remember, in gluconeogenesis, we need one of the key players that we also encountered in the TCA cycle. In the liver, for gluconeogenesis, we use oxaloacetate for the buildup of glucose, which our red blood cells need. So if we are running low on sugar in the blood, the liver takes most of the oxaloacetate, shifts it away from the TCA cycle, we don't have the carrier for our acetyl-CoA. So what we can do is we combine these two acetyl and get the aceto-acetyl-CoA molecule, this guy here. And I'd like to draw it in a slightly different form. So if we draw it like that, CH3CCO, CH2, COS-CoA. So that is the same thing, aceto-acetyl-CoA. And what we can do is, what we have done up here, we just add another CH3 COS-CoA, another acetyl-CoA, just written in a slightly different form. What happens? We've got a positive charge, we've got a negative charge here. So what we get is basically a molecule that looks like, and we lose an S-CoA from that. We get a molecule that looks like, how do I draw that? COO minus, CH2, COH, CH3, we've got here, CH2, COS-CoA. Whoa, that is a beautiful molecule. How would we name this guy? Any ideas what we could call that? Or do you want me to tell you? Tell or try? Diacetyl-acetyl-CoA. That's a great. I like your idea, but it's not di, because we have sort of triacetyl-CoAs in it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it would be something tri. Okay, something CoA. Yeah? What's this something? Now, the official name of this brother is 3-hydroxy. 3-methyl glutaryl CoA. Glutaric acid is when we have COO minus 1, 2, 3. And then CO minus. That would be glutaric acid. So that's this one here. We start counting from the CoA. So that's 1, 2. So we have 3 hydroxy. Hydroxy has priority. The carboxylate ion isn't the heaviest. Let me think about that. Okay, Lizzie? I come back to that. Probably separate. Need to check whether I totally understand. Okay, so we have 3 hydroxy, 3 methyl gluteryl CoA. And I see. The reason why we start here is because we've got the S-CoA here. Otherwise, we could have started at the other carbon, but because we've got the S-CoA, the thioester here, we start at this end. So this is also called HMG, 3-hydroxy, 3-methyl gluteryl CoA. So let me just simply draw this again. COO minus, CH2, CH3OH, CH2, CO, and S-CoA. And what we can do with this guy now is we can actually split it again. And if we split it here, what you see is we get back well, it's not the heaviest. Carboxylic acid. All to hydroxy as a prefix. What is the prefix version? Olate. Carboxolate, I think. But I need to check that. Good question. Thank you, Lizzie. So what we get if we split this molecule is we get basically CH3, CO, S-CoA. And what have we got here? We've got a slightly different molecule. We get CO minus, CH, and we can remove, during this split, we can remove this one here. So we get COCH3. Okay? Now, this molecule we have almost encountered before. When we had it in a slightly different form as a CoA, this molecule is now acetoacetate. In this form, we could have done it, but we would have lost this CoA bond. So in a way, with a slight detour, yeah, I know, it's so many molecules, but don't worry about that. We will come back to that. Now we've got acetoacetate here. And I want to highlight this molecule. Because what you see is it doesn't have the S-CoA attached to it. If a molecule has S-CoA attached to it, it is not easily transported. In the blood. Why? Because the S-CoA bond is a high energy bond. The cell does not want to lose high energy compounds, especially not the S-CoA part, because that is incredibly precious. You don't want to send out your kids with £5,000 in the pocket, do you? Well, you probably don't have kids. I don't. I would not send out my kids with £5 in the pocket. God knows what they are doing with that. They go to the next co-op and invest it in sweets, which people might argue is quite sensible, but no, not with my money. However, acetoacetate can easily be transported in the blood because it is fairly hydrophilic. Tell you what, just when I said it, I thought somebody might make this comment, but you are absolutely right. Mind you, with the current prices, how much do you get for £5 in terms of sweets? Not enough, exactly. I think that's exactly what I thought. So we've got acetoacetate. Yeah. We've got acetoacetate, and this can be easily transported. We can also take this molecule, use NADH, and convert it into COO minus, CH2, OH, CH, have I made a mistake? 1, 2, 3, 4. I've written it the wrong way. Hang on, I done it the wrong way. Sorry, forget that. I need to write it as COO minus, CH2, CH3, OH. Okay, I'm not entirely sure. I think I made a mistake somewhere. We have a 4 carbon. Let me just quickly check. Yeah, you see, this is what happens when you talk about sweets. This happens to me when we have sweets. I better check that I don't tell you anything wrong. acetyl-CoA, acetyl-CoA, acetoacetyl. We have H. Good. Now I think I got it. We have H3C, COH, H, CH2, COO minus. Now, finally, I think that's what I had previously. I apologize for that. And this molecule would be called beta-hydroxybutyrate. Hydroxybutyrate. And again, it is nicely transportable. And again, I want to highlight this guy. And the third compound that can be quite interesting in this case would be if we take the acetoacetate COO minus CH2 CO, and we've got CH3 here, so this is our acetoacetate here again. If we take a carbon dioxide away from that, this one here, and that is a non-enzymatic reaction. What we end up with is this compound here. I write it as CH3COCH3. I want you to tell me, what is this compound called? Propanone? Yes, that's right. And the commercial name? Acetone, absolutely right. It's acetone, used to it's actually quite a good solvent. Remove nail varnish and God knows what, but it's quite toxic actually to the liver. But these reactions actually happen in the liver. So we produce 3 different compounds, acetoacetate, or we can produce 3 compounds, acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and as a side reaction, acetone. And these are all nicely transportable compounds. And because each one of these compounds has a keto group in it, they are called ketone bodies. And in a way, if you think about it, these keto bodies, or ketone or keto, you also see it as keto bodies. And the process is called ketogenesis. These ketone bodies can be released into the bloodstream, they can be transported, and they can get to the brain. And the great thing is they can penetrate the brain, the blood-brain barrier. So in the brain, they can get into the nerve cells, where we then just simply take, let's say, acetoacetate, and in a almost reverse reaction, we convert it to acetoacetyl-CoA. And we split this thing into two molecules of CH3COS-CoA. And this reaction not only happens in the brain, it can also happen in the heart, brain, as I said, and in the skeletal muscle. And what we get is, we get a source of acetyl-CoA, which we can fuel into the TCA cycle. So in a way, we've transported fatty acids, we've broken down the fatty acids that we have, and have a nice transport form in these three keto bodies: acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. Acetone not so often or huge amounts, but still there is some acetone under these conditions. And we can transport these breakdown products of the fatty acids to the organs that require them. Now, usually the brain is pretty much fixed on glucose. It wants glucose. But if we are in starvation mode, and if we have used up all the glycogen, then the brain can switch. Instead of using glucose, it will use keto bodies. But it takes a little bit of time, usually 2 to 3 days. So during that time, before it can switch to keto bodies, it uses the glucose that the liver provides in the gluconeogenesis. And of course the erythrocytes have no other option. However, this reaction here, this reaction only happens in these cells and not in the liver. So not in the liver. Why can't it happen in the liver? Because it doesn't have the enzymes, and actually the enzyme is producing the keto bodies. This is what happens in the liver here. So it wouldn't make sense if the liver produced the ketone bodies and it uses it. The liver is it can be described as the organ that provides all the important molecules. It is the service provider, it's the energy provider for the other organs that cannot produce these keto bodies. Does that make sense? What happens if the body runs out of glucose? Well, of course, it switches to these keto bodies. And some people argue that when the brain is on keto bodies, the thinking becomes clearer. I don't know whether this is true, but that is while in some cultures you find people who do the fasting and do not take up a lot of sugar, glucose. That means their body goes into production of keto bodies, and apparently this leads to sharper thinking. I would not suggest that shortly before your exam, but that's probably why people give up sweets for Lent, which sort of closes the discussion loop here. Also, this is the principle of the keto diet. Exactly, Lilo. Principle of the keto diet: you avoid carbohydrates, you burn the fat in the adipose tissue and produce keto bodies. But also, this is the thing, is what happens when you are constantly starving of glucose, when you have, well, what is the condition? When your body, when your cells don't get in. What is the metabolic condition if your cells don't get glucose? What do we call that? Absolutely right. You are diabetic. You are diabetic. You have diabetes. In diabetes, your cells are constantly undersupplied with glucose. So what they do is actually they have to rely on the liver to produce the keto bodies. And that's the great thing. The liver produces the keto bodies, but they are also acids. So in an unregulated diabetes, you produce a lot of acids which lower your pH. And that gets really dangerous, because if you are outside the 7.4 range of the pH, you are going into a diabetic coma. So the keto bodies have acids in it. You lower the pH, and also in these compounds that you produce, they smell. Acetoacetate is the stuff in glue, and acetone, of course, also has a very characteristic smell. And that is the reason why the breath of unregulated diabetic patients actually sometimes smell of acetone or acetoacetate. And it used to be a sort of a diagnostic tool. If you smell acetone on the breath of somebody, you can be pretty sure that there is unregulated diabetes, which can be extremely dangerous. Apparently, other organs demand the high level of sort of energy. For example, tumors. If you have cancer, then the tumor will potentially, and yes, of course, sweet urine. If you've got a tumor, then they need a lot of energy through glycolysis. You starve the cells, the body, of glucose. Even if you're not diabetic, the tumor uses all the energy. The liver reacts by producing these keto bodies to supply the energy, acetone, and apparently this is the reason why some dogs can actually smell if a person has cancer. Because it sounds like they can smell these keto bodies in the breath of the patients. And I think this is absolutely fascinating and definitely worth further exploration. Wow, we have done 2 hours of hardcore biochemistry. I'm really impressed with you and all those of you who are still alive. Yes, there was recently in the press, Lilo, about a woman who can smell cancer because some people actually can smell very small traces, particularly of the acetoacetate. And I don't know what the story is behind the Alzheimer's, but I think this is really an interesting story. I would have loved to tell you a little bit about fermentation, but I think I will do a YouTube tutorial on that and post it on Moodle and other things. But again, fermentation is interesting because what it does is really produces a lot of interesting things, not just ethanol, but also other compounds. Of course, humans are not capable of fermentation, and that's why I don't put it in the exam. So, I hope you enjoyed this online session. Let me know in the comments what you think about it, if we should do more of that. And, well, thank you very much for watching, and please stay safe. Don't eat too many sweets. And again, you know, have a great time, even without face-to-face lectures. Thank you so much, and have a good time. See you hopefully soon. Stay safe. Bye-bye.